Stephen Hawking and Noam Chomsky had mathematics and language. Dr. John Nash had behavior and mathematics, philosophy and theory. They did what Einstein did with the computer, and they made laptops, and they made devices, and they made objects, and they made energy in silence. Eventually, they met Bill Gates, and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and now Jeff Bezos, they all use networks and systems with processes, security and safety involving those parts of psychology they sell in their bookstore about psychiatry, where they buy their stuff from overseas to bring over here for their medicine and health. They teach remote working and listening to the sound of their voice in silence, saying what they're doing has to do with the intellect and the brilliance of their intelligence. They've used to keep track of time and entropy, to make sure the poet doesn't speak about culture and dialect, to cause their ethnicity a duality in silence. Those mathematicians and those language artists who were painters in Picasso, Pollock, and all of the other geniuses who made CDs and tapes back when they had cassettes and not an Amazon Video on a Sunday in silence, in a library where you can't make more than silence in silence, or you risk the enforcement of the power in silence, causing more silence in silence. Walter Benjamin made the Arcades Project before he tragically died before World War II began. A Jewish man who was a humble philosopher. But then Kandel said to the Irish surgeon, Dr. Emmanuel Ferreira Jr. doesn't need to hear about his candidate for surgery on a Sunday. He needs to hear how he cured cancer and didn't get assaulted for probably 1,000th time. In silence. They wrote these textbooks and they taught these classes, and they had to teach in silence. So students like Malala didn't have to be afraid, like little Mayreen at Cascadia in the early 2000s. When I was studying to not go to war, but to be a chaplain to figure out what my combat buddy learned in silence. There's Barack Obama and there's the Mr. Former Presidents and all the Nobel laureates. They've taught the world about climate change. They have everything formulated to a simulation matrix they call infinity in silence, a mystery they can't explain, but they must talk about with the spookiness they see in silence. They teach mathematics at MIT with Lex Fridman. And then they sit down with Sam Harris and they go over all the other stuff Canada does with Dr. Nordhoff and Mr. Peterson. Another doctor who's got more doctorates than the doctor who wants to be a doctor, who already studied for 10 years to talk about being a doctor and go to school to be a doctor. And to finally be able to say to MIT, your dumb Joe Rogan artificial intelligence robot algorithm has officially had a duality in silence.